Hello everybody and welcome back to part 3 of us discovering the Marvel lore. But of course, if for some reason you guys haven't already, please go and support the OG video. Link is at the very top of the description, like always.
Now we reach 2019's Absolute Carnage event, which revolves around
Such
the
a metal
symbiote
name.
amassing codexes by literally ripping them out of people's spines and slamming them together in hopes of creating a strong enough signal that it will punch through Clintar and reach the mind of Null. This is a badass concept for a Venom story, though I have to be honest, the event itself is fine. There are a lot of Absolute Carnage books, but most of them just revolve around Carnage creating a bunch of weird clones of himself and then infecting a lot of other superheroes. They don't really matter for the grand storyline at large, but there is a kind of funny reason for this. The writer of this comic, and the Venom comic that introduced Null and a lot of this other King in Black stuff, Donny Cates, has said before that he did not originally intend for Absolute Carnage to be an event. It was first just going to be one arc of the Venom series, but then when he pitched it to Marvel, they were like, hey, it would be cool if we did tie-ins to this. Do you want to make it an entire event? And he said, sure. This is actually great for my purposes though, because it means that while there are so many comics under the umbrella of Absolute Carnage, most of them are kind of just fights, and so I don't really have to talk about them. If you
At least from the way that he's talking about it, it seems that it went over well, and even though it ultimately didn't mean too much, it was still an interesting read, I would assume.
I haven't read them, but yeah.
Oftentimes, I feel like the moment a studio says that, on like an idea of a story that he had, and they're like, let's make a franchise out of this, let's expand upon it, it usually doesn't go very well.
Depends. So yeah, I can definitely go wrong.
Well, like things that just keep on going on forever without a real ending to it, but this one doesn't seem to suffer from that, thankfully.
want to read symbiote fights, you could go read them, but the main line and the Venom series are the only ones that really affect the lore. Now, I should note that, as I briefly mentioned earlier, this was technically not Null's first influence on Earth. That happened with the dragon. The dragon gave him like a residual connection, which gave him a tiny, tiny little way of putting his mind back into the hive there, but this did not last for long because, well, the symbiotes that were connected to the dragon did not really last for long either. This would reignite some of the cult stuff and some other symbiote research, however, and that would lead to Carnage trying this plan, so really this is just the US military's fault because they shouldn't have been experimenting on an alien dragon. This is also the era where—
Well, maybe a bit of a spoiler. If you want to watch Welcome to Derry completely blind, skip like a few seconds ahead here. But yeah, the US military does go around fucking with stuff they really shouldn't. Don't fuck around with Pennywise and use him as a weapon in war. That I don't think that's going to work out.
I've never seen it, but that sounds like a bad idea.
Oh yeah, 100%. You don't need to know anything. Just using a supernatural cosmic being for a weapon of war that you think you can control, not the greatest. No, not good.
No,
where we get introduced to Dylan Brock, who I briefly mentioned earlier and kind of promised would be weird. So let me explain what's so weird about Venom's strangest kid. Dylan Brock is a human symbiote hybrid, which, yes, is a thing that can happen, though I believe Dylan is the first and only example of it. Actually, I get to do two callbacks in very rapid succession here. Remember when I super briefly mentioned that Venom bonded to Eddie's ex-wife, and then I was like, that's going to be important later. Remember that was a thing?
Yeah.
It's a thing now. Dylan Brock technically has 3 biological parents, those being Eddie Brock, Anne Weying, and the Venom symbiote itself. The way that that is possible is that when Venom was bonded to Anne, God, this is going to be really weird to say, the symbiote impregnated her using residual samples of Eddie Brock's DNA. This led to Dylan.
Was she okay with that? Was there consent?
Yes.
Well, for a sort of superhero, it felt weird to say. For me, it feels very weird to think about. Like, what are the implications to this? I guess we get Dylan out of it, so it's fine, but like, If I was the ex-wife, I don't know how he'd feel about that.
Being born by what seemed to be a normal human pregnancy, and Eddie and Anne just kind of thinking that he was their normal biological child. However, that was not the case, and though he seemed human, he actually had symbiote powers. When it comes to the symbiote species, Dylan functions kind of like a mini version of Null. This kid has complete control over the symbiotes. He can sense their presence, he can control their forms, and he can even pilot them remotely through the hive mind just like Null could. This allows him to do some absolutely insane stuff that we have not seen symbiotes be able to do before. In one case, Dylan forced a symbiote without a host to assume the form of a T-Rex that could then fight for him.
Okay, you know what, Dylan? Dylan's pretty cool. I like him a lot.
Pretty cool, yeah.
I have no biases here, but I like him a lot.
God, Dylan Brock is really cool, actually. I love this kid.
Hey,
Though kid is a very important part of that, Dylan Brock is still young. We don't know his exact age because comic timelines are weird, but he is probably somewhere within the range of 10 to 15 in current canon, and because of some events that we'll talk about later, he does not currently have access to his full powers. This is probably a good thing, though, as we have seen adult versions of Dylan in alternate universes, and in at least some of them, he grows up to become a world-conquering supervillain named Codex. Anyway, back to Absolute Carnage, there is less here.
Yeah, with all that power comes great responsibility, and without anybody to really guide him, that can always turn out bad, so understandable.
Yeah.
that we have to talk about than you might think. The main twists of Absolute Carnage are, first off, the introduction of Dylan and exploring a bit more of his origin, and secondly, the ending of it. Carnage, right in the climax of this, gets a huge power boost from Null, which makes him look incredibly cool. I mean, this is one of the most emo and edgy designs I've ever seen for a supervillain, but I cannot deny that it absolutely rules. Despite how cool he looks, Carnage does lose at the end of this. He is beaten by Venom, but the damage is already done. Even though Carnage is defeated, he has collected enough codices that he has punched a little psychic hole through Clintar as he originally intended. This gives Null a little window from which he can extend his influence, and he breaks out of the planet entirely, setting a course for Earth. Now we get to one of, if not the biggest events in Venom history, King in Black. Null does not waste a moment of time in restoring his former glory, which is a lot easier than you might think it is, actually, because, well, I'll put it this way. Caging a dark hive mind controlling god in a prison made of his own minions is a very cool idea that worked for a while, but the second there's a notable crack in that prison, I mean, he just reclaimed control of the hive mind and all of the symbiotes on Clintar immediately, so Null was back as a threat.
Yeah, if it lasts, it's good, but these things never last. Like, these villains that are in prison, they're always gonna escape. Like, even if they die, they'll find a way to come back somehow. That's just superhero comics for you. Oh, and there you go, Wiccan and Hulkling.
The Abyss army begins spreading across the galaxy, and we do get to see a couple comics of them being a problem for other planets, but Earth is the main target, because the guy who defeated Null previously is there, and he is well established to be very petty. The first issue of the King in Black event is basically just hype for Null's invasion and how massive it is, which, yeah, it is absolutely massive. He brings dragons, a whole bunch of dragons. Each of those dragons can also spawn symbiotes on its own.
Jesus fucking Christ. Imagine being the Fantastic Four, seeing this coming from the sky. Like, yeah, we got this. There's not enough clobbering time to go around for this one.
And we get to see the first look at a larger unit in Null's army, which is symbiote corrupted Celestials.
Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Don't we just lose to this? How do you fight back? Would Galactus even win against this? I don't think so. I don't know.
More Celestials.
Yeah.
I hope they don't get corrupted.
I don't know. The Celestials would maybe just take a look at this and be like, yeah, reset the universe.
Yeah, he did that at some point in the past, which, again, I guess does make sense. His whole thing is that he's very petty and mad at the Celestials. If he was given a chance to overtake a couple of them, he would absolutely do so. But even the corrupted Celestials are not Earth's biggest problem at the moment. Nothing in the symbiote hive mind is, because in this case, its master has come along with them. Null is seeing to this matter personally. He has also managed to restore All Black to his control, and therefore, well, let me just show you. When the Avengers call in their greatest failsafe, the Sentry, Null rips Bob Reynolds in half. This is
No, not Bob! Bob!
No, Bob.
Oh, man. Well, I don't know much about Sentry outside of the Thunderbolts movie. Does he gain some sort of control over his powers at a point? Or does he just, like, unleash the other side of him when he needs the powers?
So in comics, the way Sentry tends to work is basically Sentry is, like, in control and he can do whatever he wants, but for whatever good Sentry did, the Void would then come out and do the opposite, like equal negative to whatever positive Sentry did, which is why he eventually retired, because he's like, I can't deal with that shit, which, valid.
That's fair enough.
But in a lot of these comics, so they just kind of use Sentry as like a kind of Superman style, like Deus Ex Machina. So having Sentry come in and just get owned is a pretty big deal.
Gotcha. So ultimately, it's like, if Sentry does something to save a planet, his other side feels the need to destroy a planet, something like that? Equivalent exchange sort of deal?
Pretty much.
So using him as like a trump card, essentially, and then afterwards you'd have to stop him in order to make sure that his dark side doesn't actually do the thing, and there isn't really anything else you can do but stop him?
Yeah.
I see.
Depends on who's writing it, how good that is. But
Okay, gotcha.
Sentry has some really cool moments and some kind of meh.
It almost feels like
my favorite thing about Sentry always is that do it like dichotomy.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of writers kind of just use him as that Deus Ex Machina, which isn't very interesting.
Even after a fight, he takes one sucker punch from the Sentry and then immediately turns and just deals with that problem in a second, which I have to admit is really stupid. So now I'm going to break the flow of King in Black for a second just because I have to go on a rant about this. So as cool as this moment is, it shouldn't have happened, and I don't mean that in a power scale-y Null cannot beat the Sentry way. I mean in a narrative sense, this is not something that should have worked with how the canon is established. In the time shortly before King in Black, Sentry was doing other things. He had this whole narrative going on where he had merged with the Void temporarily, unifying his powers and becoming way stronger as he finally gained full control over them. Of course, being the Sentry, this caused a whole host of other problems. This led to him going into the negative zone for a while, and he actually remained in the negative zone because he was using his power to safeguard this universe as his risk of the Void had almost killed it previously. We're not going to go into huge detail on this because it has nothing to do with symbiotes, and that's kind of the point. Sentry was doing his own thing. He was not related to Venom at all, and they never establish how his previous storyline transitions into being here for the Venom event. And the reason that they never establish it is that nobody actually cared. Donny Cates, who wrote this event, has gone on record and admitted that he just wanted to put Sentry in this because he thought it was cool, and he didn't really do research on how this worked or if it made any sense.
This is what I mean, when a lot of writers just took Sentry and was like,
Yep. I was going to mention that too. Like, from what you described, he really does just seem like, come in here so that we can power scale this character.
A lot of writers did use him that way. Which is why Sentry has a bad reputation with a lot of comic fans, is because that's just what they know him from.
Yeah, I see. Well, like with many other characters in Marvel, it really depends on who's writing them and how they handle the story. And also, there may be some things where, initially it's received poorly, but then in retrospect, it's like, yeah, you know what, that was actually a cool idea. And right now, at this moment, we maybe don't know yet. You never know.
And I guess editorial just let it happen. So Sentry's appearance here is a callback, if nothing else. I will give Donnie this, he did not choose Bob arbitrarily. There's a famous panel from years prior where Sentry beats Carnage by ripping him in half, and then this shot with Null and Sentry is almost the exact same. So basically this is the symbiotes getting revenge, and screwing over Sentry's narrative in the process, because he stayed dead, and the next couple comics, while more interesting and working with what they had, did have to deal with the fact that Sentry was dead. Anyway, my little rant about this aside, Earth is pretty much screwed at this point, because if Null can one-shot the Sentry, what is anybody else on the planet going to do to him and an army of invading symbiotes? The classic symbiote weaknesses also don't even work in this case, because remember, fire and sound are now established to be a weird kind of generational fear reaction in the symbiotes. Null does not have that because he is not a symbiote himself, and since he's exerting direct control over the invasion forces, they don't have the weaknesses either.
I suppose that makes sense, because Null don't give a shit about your bells and whistles. He'll just smack you down into the ground. So what do we do here? We just have to, like, escape the planet, right? Or do we have some time powers? Can we just do a quick reset so to make sure none of this actually ever happened somehow? Go to a different multiverse? I don't know.
As crazy as those options are, they aren't impossible.
I don't know how you figure this one out. Maybe Venom somehow beats him and then takes control over all the symbiotes? I guess could be another way that you go about this, but like, how would Venom do that?
The only form of direct attack that seems to have any effect on Null is lightning, which does make sense with what's already been established. Thor was able to break Null's control over the hive mind by shocking a dragon with a big lightning bolt prior, but this is not going to work exactly the same when Null is right there. Lightning does injure him at least a little bit, so that's something the heroes can use, but the reason it worked so well previously is that the shockwave through the hive mind was something Null wasn't expecting. Now that he's there in person, he can tank a couple of lightning bolts, and so the pattern continues. Earth is screwed. And yeah, it is just screwed. There's not a but coming after that. Most of King in Black is the heroes fighting on the back foot after the invasion is successful. Null then creates a symbiote-like shell around the entire planet, cutting it off from sunlight and amplifying his own power even further. At this point, Null can let his army finish the work of corrupting all the population on Earth before moving on to take over the rest of the galaxy. But there is one more thing that he has to handle. After all, the only reason Null appeared here in person was to settle a grudge, and he wants to find Brock. Now, you'd think this might be easy. Symbiotes have a hive mind. It is something I have mentioned many times over the course of this video. But there is another element to it that I have not mentioned yet, being that Venom is actually not connected to that hive mind. Kinda.
Why?
I haven't brought it up because the canon status of this is absolutely a mess. Remember that Null and the hive mind and everything are a relatively recent addition to the lore, and so none of the canon before that makes sense. Making things even worse, the hive mind was introduced before Null was, and so this all came in stages, and it's been described a billion different ways. Most of the other decades-long canon questions have kind of settled on an answer. This one hasn't as well as the others do. There are many reasons why Venom is or is not connected to the hive mind. The best way I can describe it is that he, and therefore his descendants, are not part of the hive mind unless they are, which is sometimes. I don't want to get into more detail.
Okay. Depending on what is required of the story, Venom may or may not be a part of the hive mind. For some reason.
Yeah. Comic books being comic books.
Yeah, that's what you get when there's a lot of recontextualization that happens after the fact. And certain facts just don't end up lining up because different authors had cool ideas that don't line up.
Than that because it would take way too long. For purposes of this and everything going forward, Venom has been severed from the hive mind this entire time, and that is why Null could not just control him directly, except for the one time he did, which we're not going to worry about. This individual symbiote was maybe a trick up the sleeve that the heroes could use, but every single other trick they've been trying has not worked at all, and so with no other options, Venom and Eddie reconnect to the hive mind willingly, sharing their location to Null so that they can talk. Null arrives and Venom attempts to negotiate with him. After all, the only reason Null cares about Earth so much is because of that personal grudge. So Venom says that if Null will leave the planet alone, he will go with him willingly. This confuses Null more than anything else, as he looks at the host under his wayward symbiote child and realizes he should have clarified which Brock he was mad at. Yeah, Null doesn't give a shit about Eddie Brock. Eddie's just a guy. But Dylan Brock, Dylan is something special, and for the entirety of this series, he has...
I mean, because Dylan has similar powers to Null, I can see Null seeing Dylan as a threat, so you'd probably want to nip that in the bud before that becomes a thing.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Is Dylan going to be the ace in the hole after all here? He's actually going to, like, control the symbiotes and overpower the hive mind? That'd be kind of insane, actually.
Has been screwing up symbiotes left and right. He was instrumental in defeating Carnage when he was connecting to Null. He turned a symbiote into a T-Rex a while ago. Dylan has proven control over the symbiote hive mind, and that makes him a threat. Null does know who Eddie is, of course. They have had run-ins before, but he doesn't really view him as anything serious. He only wants to get at Eddie's kid. So Null simply strips the symbiote from Eddie's body and then drops him off a building. And Eddie dies. This is a cliffhanger at the end of the comic where it shows him plummeting to his death. And yeah, he does die at the end of this. It is not a fake out. Of course, this is comic books, so he gets better. But while Eddie is recovering, or I don't know if you could call what he's doing recovering per se, but we will get to it, let's talk about what everybody else is doing during the process. King in Black as a comic event is very similar to what Absolute Carnage was, but just kind of better. While Abscarn, as it is sometimes called, was just a bunch of symbiote corruption and fights, King in Black is a bunch of symbiote corruption and fights that have a narrative thread linking them all.
Hey, yeah, even better. This is what I talk about all the time when it comes to strategy games. Like, I know some people can just play strategy games simply for the gameplay. For me, though, I feel like it really enhances the experience if there's a narrative through line to why I'm playing out, like, a specific battle. Or, like, seeing the actual story blend with the gameplay just enhances the experience for me a lot. But yeah, to each their own.
A lot of the comics are about
for a good narrative.
Isolated heroes and sometimes villains fighting off symbiotes wherever in the world they are based, because this was absolutely a global spanning event. But there are others that are more connected to the resistance against Null as a whole. For example, there's a mini-series where the Thunderbolts are trying to transport Sentry's corpse to one of Null's bases of operations so that they can use him like a super bomb. We don't have to go into detail on a lot of these tie-ins, but there is one that I need to talk about because it is way more important to the larger narrative than all of the others, that being the King in Black Valkyries comic. So remember how Null decapitated that Celestial a while ago and the skull went on to become his forge and then later nowhere? Did you ever wonder what happened to the body of that Celestial? This comic answers that question. Because Celestials are weird cosmic things that are largely unmoored from the laws of logic and geography, somehow, while the head stayed in the physical realm, the body of the Celestial drifted into the afterlife, or like a weird middle afterlife realm, where it started functioning as an anchor point for All Black. Apparently, every time All Black killed anything, the symbiotic properties of the sword would trap that being's soul and then send it to this celestial corpse. This was why the blade was so incredibly strong. It was feeding on the souls of its victims the entire time. So the Valkyries, beings who can travel in and out of the afterlife, are sent in as a special kind of strike force to sever this connection. This does work, and All Black loses its cosmic battery, which admittedly was something that they kind of needed to do. From a publication standpoint, All Black was introduced years before Null was, during the Gore the God Butcher arc, and then they established its origin as a symbiote thing after that. This meant that All Black on its own kind of had a villainous history, and so if they wanted Null to be treated as a villain independently, they needed to kill All Black separately, and Valkyries did that part. The last King in Black side thing going on I want to talk about before we return to the story of the Brocks and Null specifically is what Iron Man was doing, because early in this event, he gets a sample of Null-empowered symbiote and combines it with his own extremist tech to create the Extreme-biote armor, which is...
Oh man, Tony. He's such a nerd. But I guess that's the reason why he's also Iron Man. I don't know too much about Iron Man. We still haven't really done a deep dive, but if he gets his hands on something, I feel like he's almost always going to incorporate it into a new suit.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Also, am I bugging, or is that Iron Man flying right behind Santa?
It does look like Santa. I don't know.
I mean, it's a dude with a reindeer floating in the sky. Who's flying next to him? Is that Doctor Doom?
Yeah,
I don't know.
think so.
What is happening, bro? Is Santa a superhero in the Marvel comics? Well, maybe Santa is our real life superhero.
Is maybe one of the coolest suits in Tony's entire history. Also, he can control its shape because it's part symbiote, so he turns it into a dragon at one point, and then turns it into...
Are you kidding me? You can turn it into a dragon that you ride? Wait, are you going to say he's going to turn it into a celestial?
Into a celestial at one point.
Oh my god.
Though this is, of course, something very specific to this event. He does not get to keep this thing long term because it relies on Null. Though I didn't just bring up the Extremeote armor because it's cool, I brought it up because I wanted more of a narrative transition into this comic, where Iron Man and Doctor Doom team up to fight a venomized version of Santa. It's not like relevant to the plot, it's just a funny little side thing they did, and of course they do leave it intentionally ambiguous as to whether this was the real Santa or a mall Santa of some kind. Anyway, Eddie
Why did we... Why? I guess it's...
Perfect.
It's ambiguous enough to potentially be like real Santa because the symbiotes have covered the entire world, so if you did exist somewhere in this world, you probably would have been taken. So, yeah, I guess.
Brock is dead, or, dead in air quotes, but by comic standards, that's good enough, meaning that Dylan Brock is now officially the most important person on the planet. He is the only one that can directly remove symbiotes from people, meaning that Null was right to be afraid of him. However, as the event progresses, Null's feelings on the subject change a little bit. As Null is able to view Dylan in action more directly, he realizes that they have some similarities. Both of them are not true symbiotes, at least not entirely.
It's a we're not so different, you and I moment about to come up. What's about to happen? Is Null going to be like, I will adopt you as my child or something like that? I don't think he'd be the greatest father.
No, I think he's proven that.
I think he would rather just remove all your free will and just control you like a puppet. I feel like that's more his style.
Both of them are not true symbiotes, at least not entirely, yet they both have the ability to control these things that Null views as lesser creatures. And, of course, as a part symbiote himself, Dylan and Null are directly related by blood, or whatever symbiote matter has instead of blood. This means that in many ways, Dylan is sort of Null's son. During their confrontation, Dylan causes a little bit of a feedback loop within the hive mind that does not incapacitate Null, but it does distract him for long enough that Jean Grey of the X-Men can telepathically enter his mind and find a weakness.
I mean, this is Jean Grey. We haven't learned about the X-Men yet, but what I know, she's incredibly powerful. This was the Phoenix Force, right? So that's just all the life force. That's also light too. So maybe a direct counter. I don't know.
I don't know too much about Jean Grey either, to be honest.
I just know when she comes in, she usually wins. I'm not mentioning this verbally because, well, there's nothing to mention, but for Marvel Rivals players, Null and Phoenix have no lore connection in the comics. They work well as thematic opposites, which is why Rivals pit them against each other in Season 3, but they have no relation in the source material. In fact, this one scene is the only time they've gotten even close to interacting. And this was just Jean. Well,
so
Marvel
it's
Rivals...
not the Phoenix Force, it's just Jean.
Yeah, just Jean. But, Rivals is doing its own thing too, so... it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time Rivals has done that.
Yep.
They're writing their own story. It's cool.
Now, we need to stop the video for a second and call back way to something in the first section that I talked about. Think back to like an hour and a half ago when I was talking about the King in Black. Not Null specifically, but the King in Black as a role, as a multiversal protector working opposite to the Kings in White. Yeah. Null rejected the duties of that role, of course. He didn't want them in the first place, and so he twisted the Living Abyss to his own ends. But remember that the Living Abyss was not technically his to control. That was a primordial force, the tool of the Kings in Black as a collective, and the Kings in White also had a parallel tool. Now, the Kings in White floating outside existence weren't really getting involved in what was happening on Earth at the time. They are a multiversal organization, and the entire reason that they needed a parallel job was because they were not great at responding to tiny threats like Null was compared to the scale of all existence. But their tool was still working. This tool, which I previously referred to as the Unipower, had some sentience in and of itself, so it was aware of Null's invasion of Earth and wanted to do something to stop it. Thus, it had begun making its way there as well. Now, what do you think this is? Because a lot of you have probably heard of it, at least in some capacity. This was not something new invented for the King in Black event. It was something old that was redefined. Before
I have very lacking in comic book knowledge. Adam? Warlock? Maybe? I don't know. It's not the Phoenix Force, because Jean only showed up, so... No, we'll see.
Before I reveal exactly what it is, let's compare it to Null and his own power. Null himself is a singular entity. There is one King in Black, but his power is multiple. He uses the living abyss to make symbiotes, and those symbiotes can spread, corrupting a large number of beings to Null's will. From this, it makes sense that the powers of the Kings in White would work in an opposite way. It is called the Unipower, after all. While the Kings in White are not singular, there are a bunch of Beyonders out there. Their power, as an opposite to the Living Abyss, does not bond with and corrupt multitudes. It bonds with and empowers one.
This is an all-for-one, situation. Did they get it from this?
Yeah.
Although, well, I mean, it's just like a general
it's a new concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to be direct opposites from each other, and obviously, thematically speaking,
We
like
do
one
know
is...
that My Hero, the author, is a big superhero fan, so
Oh yeah,
it's possible.
100%. He definitely was inspired by a lot of this, that's for sure.
That's right. King in Black establishes that the tool used by the Kings in White is the force known commonly as Captain Universe. Now let's briefly talk about that and its history within the comics as well. Captain Universe is a title
We've
used
had
by...
a few different superheroes who have taken this, like, power and become, like, I'm blanking on what, but yeah, the power cosmic or whatever. Spider-Man was one of the more notable ones to take it in the past, but there's been a bunch of different heroes who have.
Wait a minute. The power cosmic, isn't that what the son of the Fantastic Four has? What's his name?
God, I'm blanking.
I am blanking too. We mentioned him a lot during the cosmology.
No, 100%. And I just can't. I'm tired. Franklin. That's
Franklin Richards. There you go.
I don't know why my mind just went so blank right there.
To be fair, I couldn't remember either. I should have known because I did watch the Fantastic Four movie, and I do recall it from there that Galactus was like, the child possesses the power cosmic, the power to free me from my eternal hunger, or something like that.
By a lot of different people situationally, but the most popular is more commonly known as Cosmic Spider-Man. This force first debuted in the 1980s, with no connection to Null of the Symbiotes at the time, of course, and has been passed around to a whole bunch of people. The rough summary of how the mechanics of this thing work is that the Captain Universe energy will empower people in times of crisis and then leave. That's why a bunch of superheroes get it for short periods of time. It is crisis dependent.
I think we talked about this actually during the cosmology video way back when. Where it was like an opposing force that made sure the universe didn't just immediately blow up. In times of great crisis, the universe would actually just step in and give somebody the power to set things right.
It is kind of just a deus ex machina, but it is treated like that. This is a power that heroes use to amplify themselves against a particular threat, and then it's gone. There are cases where one person will just become Captain Universe for an extended period of time, but the majority of times you'll see it is bonded to another hero. So then the Captain Universe powers, otherwise known as the Unipower or the Enigma Force, because everything cosmic in this series has a billion names, does kind of make sense as a form of symbiote. That is not the original writing intent, but it's an interesting evolution of the lore. Captain Universe is the tools of the Cosmic Kings working as it is supposed to. It is this outside force empowering people to do things needed to protect reality and the universe, and then it leaves. It's not meant to make consistent superheroes, it is crisis response. It is the tool that these cosmic entities use to basically put a band-aid on problems. Null should have been using the Living Abyss to do that, but because he went off the rails, he was using it for corruption instead. The Enigma Force has been chasing Null down since all the way back in his earliest days, attempting to restore balance to the cosmic forces. Then, when Null got imprisoned in Clintar, well, he wasn't an active threat anymore, and so the power went off to do other things. Now that Null is an active threat again, the Enigma Force is returning to Earth, and with the help of Silver Surfer, breaks through the barrier surrounding it to go to its new chosen host, who is, of course, Eddie Brock. Now, again, Eddie was dead at the time, and he was actually legitimately dead. There's a whole scene where he succumbs to his injuries after falling off the building and does perish. But Eddie is connected to the symbiote hive mind. After all, he has a codex in him, and he has been bonded to a symbiote for one of the longest periods of time on the entire planet, so his connection to it runs very, very deep. Therefore, while his physical body died, his consciousness was sort of uploaded into a psychic space that contains that hive mind. While everyone else was fighting Null, Eddie was going on his own little adventure within the symbiote hive mind, meeting the consciousness of Flash Thompson in the process. There was no real good way for me to stick it in when it actually happened, but after losing the Venom symbiote, Flash had gained a second anti-Venom symbiote, becoming Agent Anti-Venom, and then he had died. But his consciousness was uploaded into the hive mind as well. I know anti-symbiotes are not connected to the hive mind, but this just kind of happened anyway. This would lead to...
Okay. No real explanation outside of... It's cool. It's a cool idea. Although, I guess I can understand if at some point, somehow, the anti-venom was, like, connected to the hive mind.
I mean, and he still had the codex from the original Venom symbiote.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, how it got in the hive mind, yeah. But, I mean, the codex was there, so...
But, you know, the original Venom symbiote isn't connected to the hive mind, except when it is, so...
I mean, how it got in this hive mind...
Regardless, if there was some sort of connection there, then I can kind of see how there would be, like, a copy of a consciousness there. Because it's just, your data essentially getting uploaded there, a version of you that may not exactly be you, but it kind of is.
Flash's later resurrection, as he was able to incarnate himself in a symbiote and then go restore his corpse using that same symbiote. So yeah, he's back as Agent Anti-Venom, but let's not worry about him. Eddie's doing space things. There's a thing that happens in a lot of Donny Cates comics, which is not bad, but is absolutely acknowledged by a lot of the fan base as one of his writing signatures. That being that when he writes a character, there's going to come a point in that character's history where they get all the superpowers and become the coolest and strongest thing in the universe. That time has arrived for Venom. With his normal symbiote restored and the Enigma Force power...
Wait, is he holding the... Thor's hammer and a sword too? What is that sword?
The Buster Sword.
Buster Sword.
Bring him up as Captain Universe. Eddie is able to somehow summon Mjolnir and the Silver Surfer's board to him as well, uniting them into a cosmic axe, becoming what is now commonly referred to as God of Light Venom. God of Light Venom wins. He beats Null easily, though easily and quickly are not the same thing. The majority of this comic is just a gigantic fight sequence where Venom is kicking the shit out of Null. I'm actually going to go through and count here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pages that are just a long, non-stop sequence of Venom winning and winning and winning and winning. Not only that, in the entirety of this 13-page sequence, Venom does not take a single hit himself. It is just him hitting Null and his minions over and over and over.
You know, that sounds so similar to this one comic from JoJo's. Or I think it was like either the same number of pages, like 13 or 17 pages or something, of Giorno beating the shit out of somebody. And he was just saying Muda, 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 Muda as he was punching him over and over and over again. And that was like, however many pages long that was. Reminds me of that.
In him flying into space and plunging Null's body into the heart of the sun, where the god of the symbiotes disintegrates. Now, I have heard criticism for the finale of King in Black before. A lot of people don't like that it does end with the Captain Universe power just kind of flying to Earth, and then Venom getting everything, and then just winning easily without much more depth to it. And you know what? That is kind of valid. Narratively, this is maybe not the best. However, this is comic books, and there are cases when a 13-page super badass fight sequence is completely okay. This is one of those cases. As cheesy and as stupid and as edgy 90s bullshit as it is, the end of King in Black is incredibly awesome. Now that Null has been destroyed,
I do think that seeing it as a cheesy ending is a valid criticism, but also this is superhero comics. Like, I feel like it's kind of expected in a way.
Yeah, I think for me, I would rather a more interesting plot reason for Venom winning.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate the rule of cool and that it looks awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I could agree with that stance. I think it would be much more engaging if there was like a really good plot hook that like was foreshadowed all the way from the beginning or something, and then ended up in this culmination of how we ended up beating Null through this power or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Control over the hive mind is obviously gone with him, and that ends his invasion right then and there. There are still a lot of symbiotes on Earth, and that is something that will be explored in later comics, but they are no longer under the control of the Dark Tyrant, and so there is no more symbiote shell on Earth, no more dragons, etc., etc. From here, the comic actually ends very quickly, but it leads into the next chapter of symbiote history that we have to discuss, which is maybe going to be the most complicated of them. See, after defeating Null, the role of King in Black does not just vanish into the ether, and under the circumstances, it goes to the person who killed him. This means that Eddie Brock himself is now the King in Black. The Donny Cates Venom series has one more issue after King in Black ends, called Venom 200, not because this series was 200 issues long, but because this worked out that it was the 200th Venom solo comic ever published, which is kind of neat. The point of this is to just wrap up every hanging plot thread and also establish what the status quo of symbiotes would be going forward, though a lot of it will change in the subsequent issues. Still, I want to cover it as it was presented here.
Of course.
For one, Flash Thompson is alive again. I mentioned that he became Agent Anti-Venom once more, and this is where we get to see that. The next event for him would be one called Extreme Carnage, which is dealing with the fallout of Null's invasion.
Okay, wait. How many more carnages can we have? We just had adjective plus carnage.
Yeah.
Failing. As I mentioned, there are a bunch more symbiotes on Earth now because of that, and Flash is one of the people assisting with it. Secondly, the Venom symbiote itself actually does not stay with Eddie. As the King in Black, he's doing other stuff that we'll talk about in just a second, but the specific Venom symbiote goes to Dylan, meaning that Dylan Brock is Venom for a while going forward. He uses chains instead of webs, because again, this is extremely edgy on purpose, but I like Dylan as Venom. He's very fun. I should also note that Dylan's whole symbiote controlling powers are weakened at this point, as his dad separates him from the hive mind because it's way too much of a burden for a little kid to have. He will regain some of them later, but at this point, he's just like a normal symbiote human bond. And as for
Dylan is one of my favorite things to come out of Spider-Man comics in a while. Like Greater Spider-Man, all that stuff. I like Dylan a lot.
Usually, whenever they transition to these like younger generation heroes or main characters and stuff like that, the transition is always going to be a bit of a rough phase where you're not sure if it's going to work out, whether fans are going to receive it well or not. But I haven't really seen any comments talking about like a massive dislike for Dylan, so I think thankfully generally they handled this pretty well.
Spider-Man comics as a whole have been in a rough place for a while, at least in the 616 continuity, which I am sure you've heard me rant about before.
Yep.
So we take the good ones when we can.
we take the W's where we can, baby.
Well, Eddie is now in charge of the entire symbiote hive mind across everywhere, and while he's not going to be using it as a tyrant like Null did, he is using it for good as best he can. Venom 200 shows Eddie piloting symbiotes around various regions of Earth and space, using the Clintar as peacekeeping agents to help whoever is in need. He does this consensually for what it's worth. It's not like he's directly taking over the minds of sentient beings like Null did, he's just kind of hopping in and lending his expertise. Unfortunately, human bodies are simply not designed for this level of symbiotic input, and the feedback is taking quite a toll on Eddie's mind and his body. Venom 200 establishes that being the King in Black is aging Eddie at an incredibly accelerated pace, and this is where the issue ends. Flash is back, Dylan is Venom, and Eddie is very powerful, but there are consequences of that we're going to have to deal with. They are dealt with in the next Venom series. The Venom series that began in 2021, written by Al Ewing and Ram V, is a twofold one at the start. It happens in two places at once. On Earth, following Dylan's adventures as Venom, and then let's just say elsewhere following Eddie's, because again, this is going to be symbiote lore. For the beginning of this series, we're going to be focusing more on Eddie's part. Venom's adventures on Earth are more like street level stuff. In issue 1 of this comic, we get to see Eddie doing one of his now normal space missions. He has a small strike team of symbiotes that he is hopping back and forth between, saving several aliens. But as this is going on, something very concerning happens. Partway through the operation, one of the symbiotes is severed from Eddie's control, goes on a murder rampage, delivers a cryptic message to the King in Black, and then dies. This is creepy enough on its own, and it's made extra creepy by the fact that this really should not happen. Null is dead, the role of King in Black has fallen to Eddie. So who the hell can hijack the symbiote hive connection like this? Making things even worse yet again is the exact nature of the message that this mysterious hijacker delivers, telling Eddie that yeah, sure, he's the King in Black now, but his time on that throne is extremely limited. No other information is provided, and therefore Eddie decides to investigate. Unfortunately, he has no idea where to start. Eddie is still connected to the entire hive, and he cannot sense any external connections that might be this villain. At this point, though, he comes up with what I can really only call a crackpot theory. There is apparently a moment in the near future where Eddie stops being the King in Black, and if he can figure out what that is, maybe it will give him a clue as to how to avoid it and who caused this all to happen in the first place. And, well, if Eddie can use the hive mind to project his consciousness into any symbiote throughout space, why can't he use the hive mind to project his mind into any symbiote throughout time?
I think space and time, they are very related to each other, but it's kind of a different dimension that you're trying to traverse through. Time stuff always gets super complicated.
As not a physics person, right, it would depend on how you quantify time. Because, like, when you think about things like, if you look at a star, right, you're seeing the star from, like, a long, long time ago, because light hasn't traveled this far yet, right?
Yeah.
So if you think, like, Eddie on Earth sending his consciousness to a symbiote on the other side of the galaxy.
Okay, yeah.
But
like that transmission travels faster than the speed of light. Yeah,
that's the most that I can conjure here. As I said, I'm not a physics person.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, if you're somehow able to travel faster than the speed of light, then technically that would be a form of time travel. That is one of the theories, I believe. I mean, as a big fan of Steins Gate, I should know all of these since they all get presented, but it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, theoretically speaking, it would make sense. It's just, we don't have the possibility to even try it out to see if it works.
Yeah.
This is where I am so grateful that this is a lore catch-up video for people wanting to learn about the Venom status quo and not a story summary, because let me tell you, this is a very complicated time travel arc that is not meant to be summarized. I'm going to give you the lore information that you need to hop into Venom from here going out, but I will also give this comic the credit that it is absolutely due and say that it is very good, and if you want to read it, I'm going to spoil the entire thing for you. So if you're interested in going in completely blind, you should stop this video now and read that before finishing it. Alright, with that out of the way, I'm going to begin this time travel arc by showing you another diagram. This one is going to lay out the timeline as easily as I can, and then I'll go through and explain various elements of it as we explain the details of the storyline, but I think it's helpful to have this visual reference in your mind. The best way that I can show you the timeline of the Al Ewing Venom arc is this. This is a good representation. I know this looks like a joke, and I mean, yeah, it is a joke, but it's also a little bit more literal than you might be expecting. This is a good picture of Eddie Brock's timeline in this comic, and I can hear at least one of you trying to be pedantic at me and say that this is not a good representation of one character's timeline because this is not one long spaghetti noodle, there's a bunch of noodles here. And yeah, I know what I'm showing you. That will make sense. Anyway, deciding to test out his wild idea, Eddie projects his mind into the future, and yeah, it does actually work, even better than he was expecting. He kind of overshoots his target and ends up in a very weird-looking location, which will later be known as the Garden of Time. Now, before we talk about what he finds here, there is one really important aspect of how Eddie's time travel works that I need to discuss. And I kind of already said it, but since it is very specific, I just want to lay it out plainly. Eddie Brock does not have the ability to time travel. That is not a thing that he can do. But what he can do is send his mind to occupy any existing symbiote matter. So it's not like a TARDIS where he can just go anywhere and any when. He can basically possess any symbiote wherever and whenever symbiotes happen to be. This, he very quickly learns, is not a feature that he was the only one to discover. This ability to control the hive mind throughout time is a property inherent to the role of King in Black, made very clear by the fact that Eddie is not the only King in Black present in this garden. Shortly after his arrival, Eddie is greeted by a strange being named Meridius, who also claims to be a King in Black, one from the distant future, sometime after Eddie has lost the role. Meridius then goes on to show him several others, named Finnegan, Bedlam, Wild, and Tyro, all of whom are legitimate Kings in Black that will all hold the throne at some point along the timeline.
I think we really overjumped where we were trying to go to. I think this is far past anywhere where Eddie's still going to be alive in this universe.
Because of the time weirdness that goes along with the King in Black, they will all eventually converge at the Garden of Time, which is one of the farthest points in the future of this reality. This is where I'm going to skip several issues ahead for the sake of lore and just spoil the entire thing for you. Turns out these future Kings in Black are not technically different Kings in Black, they are all Eddie Brock. The best comparison I can make is Doctor Who. These are Eddie at different stages of his existence.
Oh, and that explains the whole angry Eddie and spaghetti timeline thing. I see. So are these supposed to be from like alternate world lines or something like that? Alternate versions depending on choices that were made, but because they all are the King in Black and possess the power, they can all converge to this one spot where there is a symbiote here that exists?
Because I guess theoretically, right, if you send your mind into the future and then 5 minutes later decide to do it again to the same timeline point, it's like, I guess there would be two of you there, right?
Technically speaking, yes. It depends if we're working on the same world line or if there's multiple different world lines. I'm assuming that there are multiple different ones, but they always connect to the same one in this timeline.
And that's where Marvel gets confusing whenever time is involved. Because you have the multiverse, right? But it's not dictated like you would think with like Steins Gate with the world lines.
Yeah.
Because like the difference between like Earth 1 and Earth 2 wouldn't necessarily be like if someone, you know, had coffee instead of tea in the morning or something, right? So it's not like super parallel to that. So when you start messing with time shit in the multiverse, it just kind of becomes, I guess, a pile of spaghetti.
Yeah, we do have to add that aspect of the multiverse on it as well, and that multiverse may have several different world lines running along it that can all somehow converge into this particular moment in time, in space, and somewhere, wherever we are. So I think you just have to accept it as it goes. Yeah, the more complexity you add to it, the less clear it is to see exactly how it works. But time is a very strange thing that we still have yet to conquer.
Yeah.
will become all of these people, taking on their identities and their characteristics as he evolves. The best way to explain how exactly this functions is to just speedrun it very quickly in a linear order by the chronology of how it works. First off, Eddie Brock, like newly christened King in Black Eddie Brock, arrives in the garden and meets all of the other kings. He does not want to stay there. He time traveled into the future for a reason. He wants to find out what happens to him, and he also wants to save Dylan, who separately, in his own adventure, has gotten himself into danger back in the quote-unquote present. This gets Eddie into a conflict with Meridius, who is very clearly evil. I mean, look at him, he's a very sinister-looking guy. Meridius beats the ever-living shit out of Eddie so badly that his symbiote matter fundamentally changes, leading to the next incarnation. This is where Eddie becomes the King in Black known as Finnegan. The reason that Finnegan looks weak and shriveled is that he is weak and shriveled. This is Eddie when he is starting to understand the gravity of his situation. He has just been bested and now he's not sure what to do, which is why he appears like this. Finnegan's timeline then loops back around, with his shock and panic at the situation turning into rage. This is helped along by a little bit of magic, which is a kind of tangential thing to the arc, but eventually Finnegan's rage overtakes him, becoming his primary character trait, marking the transition from Finnegan into Bedlam. Bedlam is almost a mindless brute, motivated purely by anger, which is a very literal callback to Eddie's earlier days when he was motivated by his hatred for Spider-Man. Unfortunately for Bedlam, mindless rage is not nearly enough to break him out of this cycle of fate, and as his timeline loops back around, his rage calms to bitterness. This is when the next transition begins and Bedlam becomes Wild. Wild is clearly not as angry looking as Bedlam, but he is very sarcastic, jaded, and nihilistic. He has tried to fight his fate and it does not work, so now he's just along for the ride. Eventually, as will happen with all of them, Wild's timeline loops around again, and his bitterness cools even further into acceptance. Eventually, he is going to quote-unquote win, because all of these characters are on one singular timeline, and he will eventually become Meridius. This marks his transformation into Tyro. Tyro is a bootlicker, essentially. He is a servant of Meridius in every way possible, and is trying to learn from his future self. His only motivation is that he wants to be on the winning side. He sees Meridius as the winner, and so by sucking up to him, he will eventually turn into the winner, or at least that's his logic at the time. This is not going to work out because Meridius notably hates Tyro, and Tyro eventually realizes this, splitting off to go and seek power and evolution for himself, which of course gives him the strength and confidence to eventually become Meridius.
Yep.
Also, there is technically one more, a seventh noodle in our bowl of spaghetti, if you will, but I'm saving that one to the end because the flow of the video will work best that way, so you'll see when we get there. Now, I know that was a lot, so I will summarize.
Okay, I was able to follow that, thankfully. Shout out to Thorgy and the BlazBlue timeline for preparing us for stuff like this.
True.
Yeah, the spaghetti image at the very beginning makes a whole lot more sense now. I see. Such a interesting concept to explore, though. In a way, with the different colors of Eddie Brock and the different emotions that he experiences, it almost reminds me of like Inside Out, but except for it being inside your brain, now it's actually like visually shown, like outside you because of the symbiote.
A lot more goopy.
Yeah, very, very goopy.
Is it again one more time?
I really
just to be
like creative takes on time travel like this. Is it the most realistic or like feasible
definitely not.
Concept of time travel? No, but it is really interesting, and you can do a lot of fun shit with stuff like this, and I really enjoy that.
Sci-fi is sci-fi for a reason. It's science fiction. It doesn't necessarily have to be based on real-world physics. Sometimes it is appreciated when it is, and, like this story could be plausible in the future, but it doesn't have to be a good story.
Clear.
Definitely.
It starts as Eddie. Eddie loses and becomes Finnegan. Finnegan becomes angry and turns into Bedlam. Bedlam becomes jaded and turns into Wild. Wild becomes desperate and turns into Tyro, and then Tyro gains confidence, turning into Meridius. All of these characters are one singular one. They exist along the exact same timeline. This is not alternate universe nonsense. They are just all time-traveling characters who all have the power of the Kings in Black and therefore can project themselves into symbiote bodies. At this point in their timeline, everything is intersecting so that they all arrive at the Garden of Time to experience the same moment from a bunch of different perspectives. Is the spaghetti metaphor starting to make a little bit more sense? This is why I also say the book is not really written to be summarized, because the whole point of this comic is that it's one where you do get to see the exact same scene where everything plays out identically and you get to see the same characters with the same lines, but because you have more context from the different iterations, every scene feels different even though it is technically not.
That's actually really cool. Yeah. It does remind me of the Lionsgate visual novel and how, like, because of the new context that you have and the different perspective that you're seeing it from now, you are re-experiencing the same thing, but just it feels very new.
That's also why I think episode 7 of Agatha All Along is one of my favorite just film episodes ever.
I still haven't seen it, but I'm assuming timey-wimey stuff happens.
You have a character who her entire concept basically is she is experiencing her life out of order. So you see basically at the end of her life the culmination of it all kind of crashing together, and it's really cool.
I mean, you are one of those people who actually find it interesting to get into a series by having the ending spoiled to you in some cases, because, you know, it feels like you know where it ends, but you're interested in how it got there, which I can understand to an extent.
The most important thing of all this is that all of these things are destined to happen inevitably. As complicated and twisty as Eddie's timeline is, from his perspective at least, it is linear. The rest of the world is jumping around and moving, but he is going on one set track. That track will take him through all of these iterations into Meridius. Or at least, that's what should happen. The thing that's really locking Eddie into this one singular path is the fact that there are no outside actors on this timeline. It's not like a bunch of people screwing with the flow of events.
It's just Eddie.
If all of these people are one singular guy, he can't change his own future, because every time he tries to go back or forward, well, that's just what the future versions of him have done as well. He is stuck because the hive mind has trapped him there. There is really only one point from which Eddie can actually break this cycle, and it is a point where he is not the King in Black. If he is the King in Black, then all the others are the King in Black as well, and they can mess with his history, blah blah blah, it's very complicated. But Eddie is different. Eddie is a man, and I don't mean Eddie's consciousness, I mean Eddie's literal physical body. This is a very wild twist, so I don't blame you at all if what I'm about to say does not immediately make sense in your brain. But to break out of this little time loop that he is caught in the destiny of, Eddie controls his physical human body using the King in Black abilities. He essentially projects himself into himself at a different point in time, which is one of the places that the other Kings in Black can no longer reach because they are not Eddie anymore.
So, I mean, basically he got to that garden because he projected himself into a symbiote that existed at that time in that garden. So I guess you're basically just teleporting your body as well along into that symbiote, into a different place in time?
No, the other way around. So instead of projecting his mind into the symbiote, he's projecting it into his own physical body. Maybe just continue.
All right, okay.
Only Eddie can access Eddie. Meridius is barred from doing that. So by becoming himself in a very literal way, that means Eddie has split off from the destined timeline, and then he goes and steals a time machine and crashes into Meridius's face.
What the fuck? Whoa, wait.
Basically, the point is he dropped the symbiote shit and just went as himself.
Okay, so to understand this then, when he was the King in Black, he wasn't like his physical human body anymore. He was the King in Black, right? But his consciousness was kind of there.
Projecting his mind out like this, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So then he just controlled, using the powers of the King in Black, controlled his human body and then put himself back into his human body and then wrecked them with a time machine.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's one way to break the cycle.
Yeah.
He was just like, alright, I'ma head out, basically. That's all you really need to do. I see.
Confused? Yeah, that will happen in this arc. And I think the thing that will help it make a little bit more sense is if we go into the thematics and the metaphor that all of this is going for. The idea of this arc is exploring the idea that Eddie Brock has always been bound to something else, be it Venom, or in this case, his own destiny and his future. This represents Eddie fully being himself for the first time, taking power in the fact that he is his own and not relying on some other force to give him that power.
That is really cool because, Eddie has always been with Venom, right? And that was kind of what made him into the villain and then into an anti-hero, into a superhero. It's because we had Venom. But now who is Eddie, right? So now you're literally becoming yourself. Again, the character growth. We found who we are. We've gone through puberty now. We know what we're about, I guess. Not really, but, one can hope.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the themes here, though, and I think time travel shows that I enjoy are usually centered around this idea of fighting destiny. I guess it really depends on how they want to set up the show and how they view predetermined stuff, but I feel like for most time travel shows, the reason why it works is because things are predetermined and the character has to fight against that predetermined thing to change it in some way. And how that affects them and others is, that's to be seen. So yeah, cool. Break out of the loop. Achieve enlightenment.
Yeah.
See, to the surprise of no one, Meridius has been behind this entire thing. He's the one that gave Eddie the cryptic message which set him on this journey, and he has been pulling the strings that lead to every other King in Black getting to their appointed transition point. He is bootstrap paradoxing himself. And he's doing that with hive mind time travel. Using the King in Black abilities, he is jumping himself to different symbiotes and orchestrating events. But since Eddie is not a symbiote, by separating himself from the hive and becoming just himself, that's how Eddie wins. This is something that Meridius can no longer affect because Meridius has kind of forsaken himself as Eddie. He has become only the King in Black, thus he has lost power over his former humanity. I hope I explained that well. I'm really not 100% sure, but if you're still watching at this point in the video, I guess I did a good enough job that I didn't lose you. Anyway.
Well, it's basically the timeline where he becomes desperate, he loses all his humanity, and then fully just falls into the role of King in Black. Like, it physically consumes him, and as well as mentally, and I guess his soul or whatever becomes the King in Black. But now he has to regain his humanity by breaking free from the cycle. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Human Eddie, who still has symbiote powers even though he's a human, which is very gross to look at, goes on a little adventure with Dr. Doom trying to get a time machine. He eventually does get a time machine, and then he slams that thing back into the Garden of Time and hits Meridius.
I forgot to mention this, but Doom just shows up every now and then in this video.
Yeah. Yeah, as he does.
He's there. He's doing things. He's bringing doom to all.
This does something very weird, which is also why I used the spaghetti metaphor with the multiple noodles. By breaking out of the loop, he has made it so that his destined selves no longer have to follow along their appointed paths.
So what happens? Does the universe just reset, or do they all get sent back to wherever they were from, or do they just not exist anymore because this wouldn't happen? This would be impossible to have happened in this timeline because we broke free from it. I feel like we're getting into paradox territory now. But
I think we're long past paradox territory.
Now, in a lot of time travel stories, this might mean that these people just, disintegrate and vanish since their timeline has gotten erased. But this comic decides to do something a little bit more interesting and leaves them in their current states, meaning that all of the Kings in Black no longer have to become the future versions of themselves, so they're all just independent characters. These characters then go on to a little mini event called Venom War, which weirdly is not nearly as impactful on the lore as you might think it is, so we can skim it very quickly. Venom War is fun, don't get me wrong, but it is largely just fight scenes. I mean, quite literally, a large portion of this comic takes place in an actual wrestling ring. A lot of things are introduced in the middle of Venom War and then wrapped up in the same series, meaning they don't really have a lot of implication on Venom's greater lore, and therefore it's not stuff that we have to cover. Like this, which is called Venom World, and it's an alternate timeline where Venom takes over the entire planet. This looks like it should matter. It doesn't. They introduce this and then prevent this future in the same comic. The main things that we need to cover here are that Dylan Brock regains a good chunk of his power as Codex. This is actually something that happened earlier in the series, but again, he was kind of doing that at a street level, so it wasn't something that I was covering. Here we really get to see it come to fruition. And yeah, in the current status quo, Dylan is Codex again and can use his symbiote control powers, but because of complicated stuff, he has a limitation that he has to be bonded to a symbiote to do this, which means that he cannot just do this at any time, he has to have a partner. Most of the alternate Kings in Black, that being Meridius, Bedlam, Tyro, and Wild, all get destroyed during this arc, as well as Carnage. Carnage was on his own little side quest to become a god over the past couple years, by the way.
As you do.
Weirdly, it is more in the magic sphere of Marvel than it is the symbiote one, which is why I didn't talk about this. He goes to Hell, and he also goes to Asgard. There's a lot of complicated stuff, but in Venom War, he gets defeated and loses his godhood. So yeah, none of that really mattered either long term. The only really major thing that matters as an effect of Venom War is where Venom is, like the Venom symbiote itself. It has not been bonded to Eddie during this time. Eddie's been doing King in Black things, so while he has a bunch of symbiotes, Venom has been with Dylan. But that will not be the case after this arc. Where Venom is currently, I'm actually not going to get into a lot of detail on in this video. That is happening in a series called All New Venom, and I'm ending my summary here, barring something very important, which is what I want the actual conclusion of this video to be, not because All New Venom is bad. In fact, I actually think it's much better than a lot of the internet controversy would have you believe. The reason that I'm not talking about it is simply that it is an ongoing comic. Since this video is intended to be a lore catch-up thing, I don't like talking about series that are currently in the running, as the lore can change very frequently. And we know that's happening in All New Venom. In a couple of months, they are bringing Null back. We don't know exactly how that's going to happen. It could be an alternate universe thing, could be time travel, whatever. But since that series is changing so frequently, I would rather end my summary where the lore is solid, and that way I don't give you information that becomes incorrect almost immediately. So this is where
well, with the amount of retconning that happens, it's kind of inevitable. So yeah, I respect it.
Yeah.
It's interesting though that this whole Venom War thing happens in like a wrestling arena. That it kind of reminds me of Kinnikuman, honestly.
I don't know Kinnikuman.
I learned a little bit about the Kinnikuman fighting games. They were actually kind of interesting. But to me, from an outsider perspective, it seems like there's just a bunch of like super important battles that happen in a wrestling match. Like, you know, Kinnikuman might fight Galaxy Man or something like that. He's just made up of different planets, and you got to fight all the Devil Chojin in order to save the world and stuff like that by wrestling against them. Which, yeah. I don't know. That's what Venom War made me think of, with all the important stuff that was happening in that wrestling arena.
My analysis of the present-day canon of symbiotes ends. But there is one more thing we have to talk about. The ending. The actual ending of the symbiote timeline. The end of Eddie Brock's timeline. Now, that might sound a little bit weird. How do we know that? I mean, I just said that I didn't want to talk about an ongoing series because the lore was going to change. How on earth am I so definitively aware of where things will end for real? So, you remember that I said there was another character in the weird time travel arc? Yeah, time to talk about that one. This is the Eventuality. During his time travel adventures, Eddie comes into contact with this thing, a mysterious entity that usually just manifests as a single floating hand. This being is Eddie Brock's final form. This is him at the end of all of his...
You know, Eddie looks good in retirement. Really fit.
Storylines when he has accepted his role and become the true King in Black of reality. Remember way back in the beginning of the video where I told you the lore of the King in Black as a role and how it was an opposite to the Beyonders and all that stuff? Most of that is revealed in this comic. This is the truth of his role as revealed to Eddie by the eventuality itself. See, while Null was the first King in Black, he was never going to be the ultimate one. His role in the timeline was to be appointed and then perish, passing things along to Eddie. Then Eddie would unlock his ability to move the symbiote hive throughout time, and that gave him the ability to influence things at the scale that was necessary. All of the things that we've been following, all of the weird time travel nonsense and the other Kings in Black, those were means to an end, and the eventuality is that end. How long it takes before this end is reached, we don't actually know, and the answer might be multiple things at once. This entity reveals to Eddie that it is something very cool and extremely rare for comic books, which is a true inevitability. No matter how many pathways Eddie takes, no matter whether he loses this power and then regains it again, and then becomes something else and gains the symbiote and loses the symbiote, whatever comic book retcons happen, the eventuality will always come to pass, and that is a true, undeniable statement. This is its real power. The concept of the eventuality plays off the idea that the story of Venom never ends. It is a meta-commentary on this character as a whole. Venom and Eddie will go on a million different stories and they will be a million different things, but they will always reach the eventuality. And because the eventuality is the end point, that means it has experienced all of these different things. All timelines converge there. It has experienced everything that the universe has to offer, and this makes it the King in Black. Remember, the power of the King in Black is to influence the universe from within. The Kings in White mess with it from the outside, and the King in Black is the internal force. To really be an internal force, it has to be everything. In a weird, esoteric way, this makes the eventuality like a symbiote for existence. It is bonded to everything, ingrained within everything.
Just high concept shit like this.
It is really freaking cool. Like, what we've been able to turn symbiotes, being like this black goop alien thing, into this. And I mean, it makes sense for all the stuff that we've been setting up in regards to the Kings in White and as well as the King in Black, being that, you know, the thing that has experienced basically all of existence. It knows all of existence. Yep. It is an inevitability, an eventuality, a very fitting name.
Yeah. Projecting itself and its hive mind and everything that it is throughout anywhere it needs to go, this is how it protects the universe. The eventuality can show up anywhere because it has been everywhere, and everything will eventually reach the eventuality because the eventuality has been everything. It's a strange and complex concept to wrap your head around, but that is the idea.
I like it.
The thematic aspects of this, they're good. I'm sure this is going to seem very weird to people who don't know the exact lore of Venom up to this point, or I mean, at least didn't before this video. But when you really think about it, this is a strangely natural conclusion to everything that Venom means. The point of Venom, like the narrative point, has changed a lot over the decades of this character. Originally, he was meant to be a metaphor for drug addiction in some ways. Then, as we entered later decades, he became a metaphor for toxic relationships, and sometimes a very literal representation of toxic relationships.
Yeah.
There are themes of obsession in Venom, themes of attachment, themes of codependence, but the one thing that always permeates every story of Venom and Brock is that it's never just about one thing. The tragedy of Eddie Brock and the tragedy of symbiotes as an entire concept is that they are almost never individuals. To be symbiotic, you have to work with something. The eventuality simply amplifies this idea to its final extreme, taking the themes that have always been present in Eddie and making them literal. Eddie Brock is bound to the entire universe. He is one of the anchor points, one of the core forces that has to keep the multiverse together. He doesn't necessarily want this job, and even he himself says that it's unfair that he has to take it. But he's Eddie Brock. He is going to be bound to symbiosis, and that means that while it is in many ways a prison, it is something that he has to do to survive and for everything else to survive. It is fascinating, and it's the exact kind of thing that I would expect Al Ewing, who wrote this, to do. If he's going to do one thing in a comic book, it is going to be tie the narrative into the cosmology of the world.
Yeah, I feel like I recognize that name from the comics back when we learned about the cosmology, that it was primarily due to him and a few other writers that like expanded upon the entire Marvel universe and connected things as a whole on the macro scale on why things are the way that they are.
Now, some of you might not like this, and I do kind of understand where you're coming from. This is a very different status quo for Venom, and it might not be what a lot of you signed on to the character for. But that's the other thing that makes the eventuality great. It is inevitable, and what leads to that point doesn't particularly matter for this to be true.
Yeah.
Eddie has been many things and will be many more. He can be a hero, he can be an anti-hero, he can be a villain, but he will eventually end up at the same point. This is his role, this is his destiny, this is his symbiosis, and it is inevitable. What this comic does is acknowledge and sort of unify all the different things that symbiotes have been. Depending on what era of comics you're reading, they might be weird aliens, they might be shards of living darkness, they might be part of a hive mind, they might not be. Sometimes they're just going to be a thing that Spider-Man or even Deadpool wears. But all of these are true, and all of them can be true. Right now, in the current canon, there are so many symbiotes out there, and many of them only got singular offhand mentions in this video. Venom is bonded to Mary Jane Watson. Eddie is Carnage currently. That's another ongoing storyline that I might cover on here when the series finally wraps up.
What the hell?
Null is gone, but he's going to be coming back. Things are always going to be changing because that's the nature of comics. It can make my job rough for my personal take on it. Believe me, I had a lot of trouble deciding what to fit into this video given how much symbiote lore there is and how often it changes. And it's going to change again, too. In 5 years' time, all of this will be different.
Does an incredible job of making these videos. These are so good.
Like, I don't know how these content creators, like him and Thorgy included, just like summarize all these super complex stories that sometimes don't even follow their own logic in a way that we as casuals can still understand and follow.
It's so easy to just digest and understand it. It's definitely a talent.
An update video correcting everything for the new era. I wish I could be like the eventuality at the end of time looking back on everything with the definitive answers, but that's simply not how it works. For now, we're just on one of the pathways, one that begins with Null and then goes to Telkar and Peter Parker and Eddie Brock and Flash Thompson and Eddie again and a million other people in between. This is what the symbiotes are now. We know that much, and we know what they will eventually be in the future. As for the midpoint, well, when those other paths reveal themselves, I will be more than happy to talk about them. Thank you all so much for watching. This was the hardest video I've ever had to record. Choosing what to include and what to cut from decades of symbiote history was a task and a half. However, if you want more, that actually is an opportunity with this one because I'm trying something new. For anyone who does not know, I have a Patreon. There are a couple perks you can get on there, mostly early
I know more
and
about lore
ad-free
than I do about the real world.
Videos,
so true.
But also an exclusive video every month. And for this month, that's going to be bonus features. There were so many weird and wild symbiotes that I wanted to bring up because they were worth talking about, but whose storylines were just too tangential or too nonsensical in relation to the main symbiote lore that I could not fit them in without going on a whole ramble. The Patreon exclusive video for July 2025 is going to be a bunch of those
maybe never really picked up.
So if you're interested in hearing about a bunch of the weirdest symbiotes that Marvel has ever made, like Payback and Wreck Rap and Big Mother, that is available for you right now. It is not required viewing for this one. Like I said, it's kind of a bonus features thing, but that is available currently on my Patreon. Username exact same as here, link in bio, link on channel page, very easy to find. And huge shout out to the people who are already supporting me over there. It does a lot for helping me to keep making videos for you guys, so I appreciate you very much. Another big shout out to my artist, Ruben Perez, who drew the poses of the character that you've been watching talk at you for the last 2.5 hours. I always love working with him, so go check out his other stuff. And now, finally, after a truly ungodly amount of hours reading and researching and recording this video, my symbiote bond is broken, and I am finally free. Anyway, here's Venom Horse.
What? Venomous! Yeah! All right. Well, that was the Venom, the symbiote history. Wow, what a journey, honestly.
Truly.
And I'm glad that we tied it all the way back into the whole cosmology stuff that we learned, like the very first thing that we learned about Marvel lore too. And now I can see the bigger picture because we kind of skimmed over that in that video, but now I have a much greater appreciation of why Venom, of all people, ends up being like so important to the whole whole lore, to the whole universe. And it makes sense. Yeah, now it does with more added context. It's so cool, thematically fitting too for Venom, and such a like good evolution of the character.
Yeah, so I've read bits and pieces of this throughout, but definitely not everything that he talked about here. But I like this, I guess she say, ultimate conclusion for the character, even if we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising that I enjoy this, given one of my favorite animes is Moana Penguin Drum, which is, again, on the concept of, like, fate, versus, like, predestined outcomes versus putting your own path, and I think all of that is just fascinating. I love those kinds of stories. So...
I think we as humans often wonder about that, too. Like, there's so many ways that it can go, so many possible truths to how the universe works, but we may never know. Ultimately, we just have to decide for ourselves what we want to subscribe to. And by the way, you should go subscribe to Sir Superhero if you haven't already.
Yeah, but 100% do.
A lot of these stories can help us work out like what we want to think about the universe and how we feel about it. I think that's also another just important part of media in general, that we get to see many different viewpoints on things. And sort of expand our way of thinking, because like high concepts like the eventuality and all that can really make people start to question things a bit more.
I like when things don't have like shall we say, solid conclusion. The more ambiguous you leave something, the more you can just kind of sit there and stew on it, and I enjoy that.
I definitely think that's a preference thing, and I feel like there's like a spectrum 100%. To that for sure.
100%.
Something can be ambiguous, but it still needs to be satisfyingly ambiguous.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when like novice writers try to do it, it ends up becoming disappointingly ambiguous, like a waste of time. And yeah, that's a hard line to ride. But I think this eventuality for Venom does achieve that. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I know your opinions about the whole Mary Jane thing. I haven't read it myself, so my opinions are basically just yours.
To be fair, I haven't read too much of it, just a little bit of it here and there. There's just a lot of shit in 616 right now, and it's just kind of in the middle of it.
I get it, but
yeah.
You know, stepping back from all that, trying to think on it, this might be one of those situations where it's another like Superior Spider-Man thing, where we're hating on it now, but in hindsight, it might be like, wait a minute, that was actually kind of neat.
It's possible.
Anything's possible. Any eventuality is possible. This may tie into something incredibly cool that we just don't know about yet. Yeah. You never know. True.
Yep.
We can always hope for the future.
I mean, my hope is always that things are good in the end. So
yes,
if All New Venom can pull off something cool, I will give it that credit.
But for now, this is my opinion on it. All right. But yeah, dudes, that was neat. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this journey. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you all in the next one. Later, dudes.
Bye-bye.